Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Road to Fulfillment podcast. I'm Mike Brewer, and today I am talking about grief. And the title of this episode is The Blessing of Grief. And I decided that I wanted to talk about grief because, one, I like to talk about wellness as part of our journey, but I've noticed there are a lot of people, especially in my circles, that are grieving right now and grieving with the loss of loved ones or things in their life that have been taken from them. And this seemed like an important time to talk about grief. And myself personally, while I am no expert at grieving and grief and loss, I have lost a lot. Last year alone, I lost, between friends and family, 7 people, and prior to that, I lost both of my parents. So I've lived a lot, experienced a lot, and learned a lot, and I want to share some of that with you today. I want to share with you not just what I've been through, but also different things that I've learned to do to help with the grieving process. Actual concrete things you can take away and say, this I can do, and I know it will help. Now, you might be thinking, Mike, why would you name this episode The Blessing of Grief? How can grief be a blessing? How can grieving be a blessing of any kind? And especially if you're in the midst of heavy grief right now, you might think that's an awfully insensitive title. But I promise you it is not. As someone who's experienced a lot of loss, I can promise you that is not an insensitive title. And just to explain it a little bit, it's actually a very quick explanation. To say that grief is a blessing, it comes from this thought. If you are grieving the loss of someone heavily, if you are in the thick of that pain, then that means you have been blessed with having loved greatly. If you are grieving a loss heavily, that means that you are blessed with having been loved and loved greatly. It's a wonderful thing in this life to find love. It's a wonderful thing in this life to be loved by a parent and love those people in return. And sometimes we sit in grief and it hurts so much we don't see that. But I think it's important that we remind ourselves that we are blessed greatly to have loved so much. Now, let's talk about grieving and feelings for a second. In the midst of grief, there's a lot of feelings that go on. A lot of weird feelings that you didn't know were going to come up, like regret, anger, remorse, jealousy, some more anger, some more regret, fear. These feelings pop up and you don't know that they were there, you didn't know they were coming, and they surprise you. But they're all legitimate. And I want you to hear this. As someone who's lost a lot, I want you to hear this. Those feelings that are surfacing, that you're feeling, that you may feel guilt for, you may be experiencing guilt for some of the feelings you're having, or guilt just might be arising from things that happened or didn't happen in the past. First of all, your feelings are valid. Second, despite those feelings, having those feelings is okay. You are not a bad person because of the feelings that are coming up while you're grieving. It's a perfectly normal part of the grieving process to have unexplained feelings, to have feelings that might cause you guilt or more pain. It's part of the process, and it's okay. Now, you might be in the early stages of grieving also, and you're breaking down every day. When my mom passed away, it took almost a full year or longer, maybe that full year mark, to where I didn't break down and cry every day. Even if it was just for a moment, every day I was breaking down and crying. If that's you, I want you to know that that's okay. It's okay to grieve. It's okay that you're breaking down. Men, if you're crying every day because of a loss, it's fine. It does not make you any less of a man. It doesn't make you any less masculine because you're grieving and tears come out of your eyes. It is healthy. It is normal. It is human. And listen, we are emotional beings. We were created with these emotions. To process them is healthy. To not be able to stop tears is okay. Now, a few ways, a few things you might be able to do that might help you through the grieving process. And some of these will sound corny, and that's fine. But nothing makes a lot of sense when you're grieving. So if something doesn't sound like it makes a lot of sense to help you grieve or help you through the process, that's fine, right? This first one's going to sound corny as soon as it comes out of my mouth. The first one is schedule it. Yes, schedule grieving. It works. There's a few ways people do this. Some people I've seen will come home, find some alone time, set a timer for 15 minutes, and then they will let out all of their emotions they can in that 15 minutes. It helps process the loss. It is healthy to let the emotions out and process those emotions. If you only have 15 minutes before the next thing you have to do comes up, and you can take that 15 minutes and be emotional and let those emotions out, that is healthy. If you have to cry for 15 minutes straight before someone else gets home and you need to be able to function normally, and that's going to take you crying that entire 15 minutes, just cry for the entire 15 minutes, it is healthy and it is a natural way to process the healing. Now, the next one, stoke the feelings. This one is more for those who struggle to get their emotions out, who struggle to process a loss healthily. This is one of those things where you play a song similar to like maybe an Iris song. Okay, if you know the song Iris, you know it's an emotional song about loss. It's probably about a girl, but it sounds like you're dealing with the loss of a loved one, and it's an emotional song if you let yourself listen to it. Find something that stokes the grief to help you process it. Now you might be saying, Mike, why, if I'm not processing grief well, why would I try to let it out? Why would I put myself in that emotional state where I'm crying and losing control of my emotions? And I would say because you need to healthily process the emotions. If you do not healthily process your emotions, at some point those emotions are going to manifest, and it is going to be in an unhelpful, unhealthy way. Stoke the grieving if you cannot. And you might say, that sounds corny, there's no way I'm ever doing that. Why would you come up with something stupid like that? Listen, ancient cultures did this thousands of years ago, and it worked. People do it now, it works. The ancient Hebrews, they had people that would show up at funerals and stoke the grieving for those that were even grieving healthily, to make sure that people grieved well and got through the process well. It matters, it works, and if you need to, just stoke the grief. Poke the bear, poke it hard, and process the emotions healthily. Okay, last piece. And this is very much just a statement. Stop caring about if whether or not someone sees you cry. I can promise you, after losing my dad and then my mom and then last year, I no longer care if anybody sees me cry. There was a time in my life where I said, I will never cry. There was a time in my life I even tried to convince people that I hadn't cried before and don't cry. Well, I was an idiot, okay? It is okay to cry, and you need to stop caring if someone sees you cry, especially if you are in the midst of grieving. Now, there's more types of grieving and grief than just losing a loved one. And I shouldn't have used the word just. But there are more types of grief than losing a loved one, losing a job, a marriage ending, a home foreclosed, watching your parents split up, Those are all things that you grieve the loss of. It happens. It happens a lot. And usually in those moments, people will stuff those emotions and try to move forward without them, but they cannot. And in these situations too, it is important to healthily process the grief, because if you do not healthily process those emotions, they will manifest at some point, whether you want them to or not, in an unhealthy way. But I would like to give you a few things that can help you process these moments and these emotions. Number one, you can still use moments where if you need to cry, if you need to sit in a quiet room with no one in your house and scream and yell to process these emotions in a healthy way that isn't hurting anybody else, do that. But I want to give you a few other things that you can do to help process these moments. Let's say, for example, you're getting divorced. The divorce is final. You're grieving the marriage. Okay? This works for any of these scenarios, but I'm just picking this. You're grieving the loss of a marriage. Your life is going in a different direction than you thought it would. You're about to start a whole new life, separate from the life that you thought you had built up to this point. You're grieving the loss of your marriage and the direction you thought your life was going in. If that's you, or if you've lost a job, or your parents have split up, or some major life changes happen that's causing you to grieve, try this technique. And this isn't very woo-woo, so if I say close your eyes and you automatically check out, that's not what this is. Close your eyes. Picture the situation that you're in. Try to look at it rationally for a moment. What are you feeling? What do you see? What did you lose? What do you still have? Where does it look like you're heading? Let yourself feel the weight of the situation. Now, I want you to picture that you're about 100 yards away from the situation. You see the situation. It's still not far, but you're about 100 yards away, and there's some distance between you and the situation. What does that look like? It looks a little less intense, right? Because you're about 100 yards away from it. It's not as full as it once was. The weight isn't as heavy in your lap with it 100 yards away. Kind of feel that. Feel how the weight is a little bit less. Feel how it's a little bit less intense. Now, picture that it's 6 months from now. Okay, now it's about 300 yards away. Notice how, just like in past situations in your life, when you're 6 months removed from it, it seems a little farther away. The intensity is getting less. You're starting to see the new direction, whether you're in it or not. You're starting to see the new direction you're taking away from that moment of your life, from that situation. You're starting to see the change. You're starting to feel less weight and heaviness from that situation. Sit in that for a second. Then I want you to picture that it's been a year. You're now looking at this event that's 300 yards away, and I want you to look at it in black and white, like it's an old TV, like an old program on TV that's 70 years old. It was a black and white show. You start to see it as less. You start to see it smaller. You start to see it older. And it's a year from the event even happening. So the new life that you're creating, that you're moving into, you're starting to see it now. You're starting to enter into it. You're starting to see what's new, what's possible. And that event that happened a year ago isn't so fresh. It's not so big. It's not so recent. It's black and white now. It's getting older. All the possibilities of moving on and how life could seem good again. Sit in that for a moment. Then take a look at it from 5 years. 5 years into the future, looking back on it. It's a positive outlook. It's small. It's black and white. It is an event that happened in your life that left its mark on you. But you are no longer sitting in the emotions of that event. You have moved on. Your new life is there and you are living in it. You're happy with the new direction in your life. You're happy with how life has changed and moved forward. That moment, the weight of it, the sadness, the anger, all the emotions from it are memories. You're no longer living in that anymore. It's an event from your past. You're living in the future. Things are looking good. Sit in that for a moment. Now take a deep breath. Open your eyes. The weight of your current situation, just having gone through that exercise, feels a little less weighty. Just having gone through that exercise, you feel a little more positive about the future. I'm not making this up. This works. I have used this before. This is a real technique that high performers use. It works. When grieving the loss of a situation or something that it does not have to do with a lost loved one, someone dying, this works. This helps. It doesn't fix the problem. It doesn't change everything, but it helps a person move forward. Last thing. If you're grieving the loss of something, not someone, something, I want you to ask yourself a question. And this is going to sound like an extremely selfish question, but we are talking about how to move on as a person, how to move on through these situations as a human being, as a person. So remove what sounds selfish. Just remove that. Put that aside for now. And ask yourself in this moment, how does this benefit me? Let's say you've lost a job. Okay, just for an example. A job where your identity was kind of tied up in the work you did. This was part of who you are. Job meant something to you. The work was meaningful. You've lost your job. Now you're sitting there saying, what am I going to do? This hurts. My life is changing. What do I do? Ask yourself, how do I benefit from this? What is the benefit in this for me? Maybe the benefit is, hey, I can look for a job right now and spend quite a bit of time with my family. I can create memories that I wasn't going to create before. Or maybe it's I can look for a job closer to what I really want to be doing. I can find meaningful work in a field that I've always wanted to be in and find that job. Maybe that's it. While spending more time with my family and creating memories with the people I love that I've been blessed with. It helps. It works. I wouldn't bring it up to you if it didn't. Folks, if you are grieving, if you are hurting, I want you to know you are not alone. I understand. I care. If I could hug every one of you that are grieving right now, I would. But know this. To grieve greatly means that we have been loved and loved greatly.